Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Expanding the Conversation with Kofi and Richard. Today we've got two special guests that have agreed to join and expand the conversation with us. Rhonda and Shabana, welcome. We're excited to have you. And this is sort of like Kofi and I's personal time together, so we're happy to include some other people in it. But no, today we're going to talk about one of the things that sort of become so important in the time that we live, and it's information in the social media age, to sort of maybe share our personal perspective and thoughts on you know um, what that information means, right? How much power we now hold in our hands, and like the great Spider-Man quote, right? With great power comes great responsibility, and so I think we want to be able to share a little bit of thoughts around how we feel about the information that comes into our purview, what we do with that information, and then what sort of responsibility we have to um, for lack of a better word, police that information, right? Because now we become the source of information for somebody else, right? And so now somebody's using that to form an opinion. And one of the things that I've sort of come to recognize now is that we all have, whether we recognize it or not, we have a circle of influence, right? We have the ability to influence people where sometimes, and we all do this, right? We're scrolling through something and we see somebody like it. We might glance to it, but the repetition of the person that likes that post almost says, well, maybe I should give it a second look, right? Because if it's good enough for Kofi to love it, like I gotta look at it, right? I've got to read all of it now. And so I think we all have an influence, and with that influence, we have to be more responsible with how we share information and process information and pass it on. So I mean, I'll let you guys hop in. I don't know if Rhonda or Shabana wants to go first, or Kofi's gonna take it from here.
Let me just pick it up quick. I think, again, welcome everybody. Happy to have our guest today. I think you're absolutely right, Richard. Information in the age of social media, I think, is very topical, right? Because there was something that we've been longing for, and we've always said that human beings want connections, and social media has made it really easy for us to connect, even though it takes away a lot of the real hard work that you usually have to put into getting to know somebody. There's also this sort of, for want of a better term, fakeness sometimes about those connections, right? Where basically you've got three steps. You add friend, you search for friend, you add friend, friend responds, you post, friend likes it, best friend in the world, right? And then you get up to like 1,000 friends. And it's shortcuts. You got a shortcut to the dopamine effect that goes with working and building a relationship without some of the issues that come with the prejudgments of, are they going to like me? How do I approach somebody? No pickup lines and all that stuff, right? It's just a request, and then you become friends. But then you're right. You go into this world where information is moving back and forth in bits and pieces. And what we've seen over time is social media has sort of become a vehicle for good information and informing people about a lot of things. And you think about some of the things we've seen, even either politically or socially across the globe. But then also you've seen like sort of this misinformation across social media as well, where people are just tempted to pass on bits and pieces of information that often isn't verified, right? And so I think a big part of what we want to understand is, how do we treat information in this age? How do we look at it, and how do we deal with that information? What kind of responsibilities do we have to ensure that we're communicating truth and we're communicating information that doesn't hurt these friends that we have? And I'm not by any way insinuating that the friends that we have on Facebook are not close friends, because many of them are. But let's admit it, some of the people we really haven't met. But the point is, we don't want to hurt those people with, false information or create false narratives. And so a big part of this is what kind of obligations do we have to this information that's now going back and forth. I know there's a lot of debate about what obligations Facebook might have, whether they should have a legal obligation to deal with this information and fact check it, or what kinds of obligations do I have when I'm passing information back and forth across Facebook. I'll let Rhonda or Shabana jump in here and tell us what their thoughts are.
I think it's important to just acknowledge that, as a result of social media, we can transfer information at lightning speed and we can receive information at lightning speed. And personally, I love social media. I think it's absolutely empowering. It gives voice to the voiceless. And it also provides knowledge to people that otherwise would not have had knowledge. Shabana and I were talking about this yesterday. She can jump in and add to this. It's absolutely empowering.
It is, and when Rhonda and I we spoke about this earlier yesterday. The thing about social media is when you look at things, it's all on face value or for face value, and you take it for that. So there's a lot of prejudging going on when you are looking at a picture or glancing through a news flash that may come across your screen, and most times we take it for what it is and we believe it because instinctively that's what you do. And a lot of times even recently there were a few news articles or news flashes that came across my screen that people that I thought it was true, but I found out it was fake news. Like, I don't know if you guys remember seeing something about Chuck Norris dying or Sylvester Stallone, the death of Sylvester Stallone, all of these celebrities. And then it's all fake news. So we have to, when we look at things, we have to ask ourselves, the responsibilities on us to really question, well, do I believe this for what it is? Is it something that I'm interested in, number one? Number two, we need to think about the source of the information.
Yeah.
So, and in this generation, everything is easily accessible on the internet. The World Wide Web is the source. Before, we used to go to the library and do our research, and there was a process involved with that. It was for our kids, that's probably very ancient and archaic to them, but you had to go to the library, you had your library card, you'd get the heavy books, you'd lug books home, and that's how we gathered information, and it was authentic. We never questioned it. We never, questioned the author, or if we had to do a project and you had to cite references, you never questioned whether it was fake or not, because it was already authentic. And with social media, for example, when my son has to do projects, everything he does is research on the internet. And a lot of times when I'm reviewing that, I have to take a step back and look at what look at the sites that he's referencing and researching those and figuring out if those sites are legitimate sites for him to use in an assignment.
Yeah.
So it's on us to police that information, because false information, when it's out there in social media and in the World Wide Web, there's a bigger effect. It can have a good effect, a halo effect, or it can have a horn effect where people, if you disseminate negative information, it can have a domino effect with society. So we really have to think about that.
Yeah.
I think back in the day when, we were much younger, because we're still young, but when we were much younger and we had to go to the library, as you described, the process, the verification process for that information was already done and complete. what happens in this day and age is that we have to collect the information, assimilate, and verify, and that's interesting. It's changed the entire information transfer and assimilation process, at least in my opinion.
Richard, I'll let you jump in here. I wanted to pick up two things I think that Rhonda and Shabana are getting at. One is in the old, I don't want to say the old days, gosh, I feel like an old man if I say the old days. Right? But
I said in our younger days.
Yeah, you know, but there was a time, I guess there was a time when we understood that information had a process. It had to go through a process. Almost like when you're dealing with gold, right? Or a precious mineral. There was a process. You went to a library, you read a book. Not only did you just read that book, you went and you corroborated. You read a couple of different sources. Then you went back to a teacher. And then there was this environment in which you were, and then they critiqued it. And then, you know, you got a grade on that assignment and you went back. And so it really put into you that you couldn't just pick up information and regurgitate it and give it back to somebody, right? You couldn't plagiarize information even. You had to read it, understand it. You had to prove that you read it. So there was a process for how information is processed, how information is handled, because we understand the dangers, right, of misinformation. And you had that feedback from others. I think that's certainly one thing that I think Shabana and Rhonda are getting at, right? There is this process. And then Shabana touched on something I think that's really important. There are different sources, right? There are sources that are good sources, good quality sources, and then there are bad sources. And one of the things that we saw sort of come up in the last couple of years is this idea of fake news. And people may not believe it, but there are actually institutions and people out there that create false information and then put it out there. And then there are sources that create misleading information, which is different because there's a little mix of the truth and something that's fake. And they put that out there. And then there's good, clean information. And it's not every time that people are able to distinguish between those sources. Richard, I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, and I'll add that, I mean, as Rhonda said earlier, right? I mean, it's amazing to be able to have access to information, right? I think the old days were okay, but it took a lot longer to learn about a lot of things to get access to a lot of information from all parts of the world, right? People could tell you any stories in the books, and they always say that that history is written by the victors, right? And so a lot of the stories were told by the people that wanted us to believe a certain narrative, right? And what I said, but I don't want it to all sound like it's bad, right? Because I remember reading an article about how Scotland essentially just took all of Guyana's wealth and built Scotland, and I was like, I think it's Scotland. I hope I got that right.
Yeah, Scotland. My Lee-Dalrymple.
Hearing the story, right? I mean, and I lived in Guyana for 20-something years of my life, and I never heard that. Like nobody ever told us that that this happened, right? And again, it didn't happen directly to us, but it did happen, right? And so I think it's amazing to be able to have access to all that information. It's great, right? And you don't necessarily have to go to a library to get the information, but you're right. I mean, the dynamics that we live in, and I think I remember listening to this talk where I think it was Jason Silva that was saying that, back in the day, the times that you were born in and you died in didn't change very much, right? But now, a decade can happen in a week or a month, right? And I think that's what we're seeing, and that's why we're having to have these conversations, is because when we're all about the same age, and when we think about, we're talking about going to a library and getting a book, and I didn't go to the library a lot, so clearly you guys are much more informed than I am. but when you talk about going to a library and getting a book, I mean, that was in our time, right? I mean, when we talk about the way we access music, that was in our time. I mean, it was, on a cassette, and you take your pen and you spin it back. And so in our lifetime, the leaps and bounds that technology has made, right? And the changes that we're having to deal with, the dynamics are so different, right? And so now we have to sort of think about how do we manage that, and how do we cultivate, right, as you said, the sources that we're getting information from. It's almost like we have to write the different policy and procedures manual just to survive in the time that we're in, because information is so much.
Just before our guests jump back in, Richard, to me, things, they say the more things change, the more things remain the same. I see the technology and I see the changes. What I don't see in terms of change is the players, the characters, right? You remember, I grew up in a country village in Guyana, okay? And you always had people who would bring information. You know this, some people you call it talk name, or you pass on stuff. Sometimes it was true. Your ears was always itching for it. Sometimes it was true, but sometimes it was blatantly fake. People made up stuff. People passed around lies about other people in the neighborhood. This was just a normal part of human behavior. Now we just do it online, right? We just have, we can do it very fast. We can do it on a much larger scale, but the players are still the same. There are people who want to pass on good information and help people grow and do great things. You always had those people, in your neighborhood. And you always had people who wanted to store a problem. She got lost at the mom body, and I mean, it's the same kind of bullying that you see on Facebook, right? No matter with he, Bono, he this, he the, right? He's the this. It's to me, it's the same sort of thing. I'm not to like play it down. I'm saying it, in a joking way, but the characters really haven't changed, but the vehicle by which we're able to do this hasn't changed. And what I'm advocating is that the process by which we verify information shouldn't change either. Yeah, we had to go to the library. Now we go on our computers. But when we go on our computer, I think we should be applying the same sort of mental and psychological, assessment of information before we just kind of go throw the information back out there. And that's all I'm saying. So I think, of course, like I think everyone on this panel agrees, social media is great. It's one of the reasons I got on social media is because it allowed me to reconnect with a lot of friends, particularly from high school, one of the best period of my life. And also all of these folks, who I'd grown up with and who I'd seen and how they had changed. I mean, it presented this opportunity to reconnect, not just with new people, but the reconnection with people that you already had a connection with, which is kind of, you and Shabana and others, right, from the same community, were able to reconnect in a way that's super powerful. I know Rhonda is able to reconnect with folks from bishops and across the globe, folks you haven't seen. So the power of it cannot be denied in any way. I think the responsibility, of course, grows with that power as well.
So since you mentioned responsibility, in my opinion, I feel like social media is a marketplace, and the commodity that's being traded is information. So we have producers and we have consumers. Where does this responsibility lie? Does it lie with the producers, the individuals that are posting and sharing content, or does it lie with the consumer, the person's receiving, or both? What do you guys think?
Well, I don't know if Shabana has a thought on that. I'll jump in real quick. I think at the base level, everybody's got a responsibility to assess the information, because first that information is coming to you, particularly if you're a consumer of the information. What I do admit, however, is that a number of folks on social media are lay people, and that ranges from children all the way up to the older generation, particularly those who are really young and those who are old and haven't really interacted with information in a certain way. I mean, Rhonda, you know this as well, that things like scams and so on tend to catch a lot of older people. So I think there's a responsibility on those who are consuming the information in the same way when you go and you buy food, you look at a fruit and you go, yeah, this is a rotten mango, I don't want it. I think you have to look at information in the same way. I think also the producers of the information have a huge responsibility. And I'll go even further, and I know this is an ongoing debate in Congress and in other countries, in the US Congress and in the Congress or administrations of other countries, as to whether there needs to be a legal obligation to the producers of the information to fact check that information before the information actually makes it into the superhighway, onto social media, before people consume it. Again, in the same way, a vendor and producer of a food product or a drug has a responsibility to make sure that it is safe for public consumption before they go out. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, so if I may add to that, social media is just a huge reservoir to peddle fake information. And unfortunately, I think we have a tremendous duty and responsibility when we look at that to figure out for ourselves, what is it we want, what is it we see? Because a lot of times we see an image and we put interpretation to that image before reading the context. And scientifically it's been proven that humans, and to Rhonda's point, commercialism and consumerism, it's all based on imagery and colors and what brings in the attention. So we have to realize and understand, well, what is it this article is trying to tell us? And also, to your point, Kofi, with institutions or websites or news media websites that share information on social media, there are a lot of every organization, some organizations I should say, have an agenda. And sometimes that agenda is a political agenda and it's one-sided and very biased. Yeah. So we have to be aware of that and be conscious of that. And that's not something that you learn in they're not teaching us these things. There's no class on that. In schools, they're not teaching children how to disseminate the information and what's unbiased information or information from a quality source versus information that's just out there and you don't know how valid it is. So Rhonda and I were speaking about that yesterday because we were talking about our kids and when they have to do assignments and all of that, and how we have to always check on the sources. And also, with social media in the age of Facebook, sure, we have a lot of friends that it's a good way to connect with people, but also it's a very quick way, I find, that we judge other people. So as much as the connectivity is there, everything is happening so fast, including what you see. You may take that for granted and assume something about someone based on a picture taken in a specific moment that person chooses to share on social media. But that that's not speaking about the person, who the person is, and it doesn't tell the story of the entire person.
The picture, I was going to say, the picture lacks context. You're just seeing a snapshot in time and you're making a judgment, and the individual isn't present to defend or to speak to the context of the picture. I know people do that, unfortunately, when they're trying to hire people. They go on their social media sites, and it's rather unfortunate because the person, an employer might see a pic and make a judgment, and the person isn't there to say, yes, this is really what happened. No, that's not what happened. So I think now what social media has done, it has caused, and I don't mean to bash on social media because I do like social media, but it has sort of, brought to the fore lots of opinions. It's quite subjective. People don't deep read anymore. There's no fact checking anymore. And I guess that's just how it is. But yeah.
Yeah, I actually just had a brilliant idea as you guys are talking about that. I think maybe what we need to have in the social media platform, and I think we can probably start with this from our own perspective. of having categories of information, right? So let's assume, for example, the same way I can like, love, care, be angry, sad, whatever. I could also say, this is a personal viewpoint, right? Or I feel like
Yes.
this is politically driven information, or this is solid, right, research information, right? So let's say, for example, one of us are reading a post. Just the same way we'll hit a like button. I'm like, yeah, this is somebody's personal opinion. I'm going to tag this as a personal opinion. So when somebody else sees that post, let's assume after 10,000 people have seen it, it says, well, 9,000 people believe that this is a personal opinion. Therefore, it's a personal opinion. We might respect the person, but let's not confuse that with research confirmed information. And in the same way,
I hope Mark Zuckerberg is listening to this
I hope he is, because I think it's a brilliant idea.
We'll send this video to him.
Right, because what it does now, it allows, in the same way we're all sort of consuming it, I think we all have to police it, right? We all have to play a role in making sure. So if it's and Facebook and Instagram and all those places and LinkedIn and all those places can do it, right? They can tag it as well if they feel like it's a verified news source, and they can, easily build algorithms to verify that it's coming from a real written document, and that's easy. But I think even when we get information, we can say, well, I believe that this is a politically driven thing. And it's my personal view. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the majority of the views, and again, I'm sure people will find ways to work around that, but I think I certainly think that'll help. And for me, at least, that's how I kind of look through it, right? Because when I see information, and this is all helpful, right? Like, we all have to be willing to hear people's rants and their misinformation, because it might be an opportunity to actually have a conversation. Like, Bhola and Kofi, I see you talking about the craziness out there. Like, I know we talked about this, but that's not the same thing. So what's going on? And it could be that your account is hacked, right?
Yeah.
But I think
that's happened to me before. I've posted stuff on people go, we got to check to see if this guy account's been hacked.
Yeah.
But no, I posted it.
Right. And so I think we have to recognize that we need to see all of it, but we all have to police it for ourselves and start with some basic guidelines as to how we're going to process that information.
So there's a couple of big things I think you guys are all touching on. I think Shabana touched on, a picture, and Rhonda talked about a little context. And I think a picture tells 1,000 words, but sometimes the 1,000 words that people hear are not the words that you meant to say. I think people have to remember that, right? And then the other thing that goes with that is a text without context is just a text. But, again, people are going to put things in their own context. But I think context is really, really important. I think the other thing that Shabana touched on is this idea that you put something out there and you get likes. Well, there's an MIT study that shows that the satisfaction that we get from likes, because of course it's a dopamine effect, right? You put something up, you're watching that, they're liking, how many people like my stuff? How many views does my video get, right? It's actually this feedback mechanism in our brain that is generating dopamine. And sometimes it leads to depression if people don't really get their likes back, or people are not responding to the things that they're putting out. But generally, if people are getting likes, there's that dopamine effect. And so it feels good. And what MIT showed was that sometimes that feel good experience overpowers the need to put true information out there. So you don't want to verify it, but if you want to post something, you're going to get a lot of likes. And that's probably more important than me verifying this. So sometimes we have to fight that urge to get a like, to say, look, man, I have to do some verification here. And I think, Richard, the other thing that you touched on is algorithm, right? What's interesting here is, I think you make a really good point, because a lot of people have been making the points you made. Do social media, do programmers go in there and create this, this army of fact checkers who go in there and look through all of these articles and start tagging them, right? And also tweak the algorithm so only the trusted source information makes its way to the top, and the less trusted information goes down at the bottom. The one caveat there, right? The one challenge is that when you start tagging information, or you have a group of people tagging information, I think you make it real easy for people to say, well, somebody else did the work, so this information must be true now, because now you reinforce it. And so information that's misleading, not necessarily false, but misleading, that gets the tag, you go, Facebook checked it, I'm good to go. It shouldn't remove, even if it happens, I don't know if it will, or maybe Mark and those guys are thinking about this, but I don't think it removes the personal responsibility that if you're going to share an article, if you send me an article, I hope you read the article. That's all I'm going to say. People have shared article before, and I've gone through the article, and at the end it says this is a joke, and this was a farce. I mean, I read it all the way through to the bottom. You go down and you see it below, and it tells you that we live in an age where we want to see a quick post, a one line. People don't want to read really long things on Facebook. I know.
Exactly. Yes.
On Facebook, our videos are long. I get it. But people want this quick 2-minute package piece of information that I think sometimes can be a problem.
Yeah. It goes back to the point I think we were making earlier. Nobody wants to do deep reading. And there was a study done recently that, people at one point would, spend lots of time reading a book. Now, thanks to social media, everybody wants to read a quick line or see a tweet. Exactly. And that's it. That's the extent of the reading. Now, we've talked a little bit about, I guess, how information is transferred. Now, let's talk about how information is collected in the age of social media, because, we are just scrolling through Facebook and we spend, 3 seconds. We didn't click on the video or pick. We just spent 3 seconds looking at it. And then, Facebook is showing us ads and things connected to that. Yes, all the cookies, you go to buy stuff in a store and, they want your zip code. And go ahead.
I just realized why they call it cookies.
Why do they call it cookies?
No, I don't know. I don't know why they actually do. But it feels like it's a little nibble.
The little nibble, the little bites.
Yes.
So, little bites. Yes.
I know. The thing is, you go and you're bored, right? And you go, I wonder if Amazon has this product. You search. Mm-hmm. And then, you say, man, maybe I'm indulging too much. I probably shouldn't do that. And then, if you have an addiction to this stuff, right? Next thing you know, you're going to social media and it's like every stage.
Everywhere.
I feel like for people who have addiction problems, those kind of cookies, I think it's kind of bad for people, because here it is, you're trying to get away from stuff, and one glance, and notice that they change it, like you said, Rhonda, in the past, you had to click on content for them to say you're interested in content, but they've changed the algorithm now that if you scroll over content and it's on the screen for like 3 seconds, they interpret that as, you're interested in it, and then they start showing you more and more of it, no matter what sites you go on, right? You start to see it moving across multiple sites, and the information is just in your face.
Doesn't that make us a little bit, I don't mean to cut you, doesn't that make us a little bit more, doesn't that make us more vulnerable now? I mean, people are collecting things without us even knowing information about us. It makes us vulnerable.
I'll let Bhola and Shabana jump in here, but the last thing I was going to say is that it tends to, if it tends to reinforce and validate certain things that we have, both for the good and for the bad. If you've got a mindset about a certain thing, you have an idea, a concept about something, whether it's good or bad, let's say you believe the world is a horrible place, and you click on that, you're gonna keep getting things that say the world is a horrible place. Now every day you go on social media, you're going to believe the world is a horrible place. You're gonna start sharing posts that say the world is a horrible place. And that's what your world becomes. So the more you like and you click on things, right, the more likely that stuff's going to come. Nobody's out there saying, Shabana has looked at this for a lot. Let's change it up a little bit and start showing her something else. Let's give Richard, this self-improvement stuff. Let's give him something else, No, you do that, right? The more you click on certain things, the more they start to drop it to you and reinforce those positions. So I think sometimes it can be a little bit of manipulation there.
Yeah, to your point, Rhonda, data collection is of such in this age that there's a footprint of us out there. There's that footprint of us, everywhere from the GPS in our phone. So they know where we've been, where, you know, if we're eating at a restaurant in Barbados and we're on vacation, they know everything about us, from the things we buy, what we like, our nationality, based on simply being on social media. And by us sharing information, we take it for granted and we share it openly as a fun thing. And I also like social media. I think it's a great way for people to, you know, express themselves and connect with people that they know and with new people. However, it's also this huge information gathering where, you know, our next move can be predicted. And you really, you know, you have to ask yourself, do I want that, or is it too late?
Yeah,
And
well, yeah, I'll hop in because I think it's too late. And here's why I say that. I'll end this. This will be my last comment on this, because I think we could go on talking with this for hours. Here's the thing, right? There is, and Kofi, you and I talked about this, right? There's our physical world, and then there's a virtual world, right? The things that are happening in our physical world aren't all that different from what's happening in the virtual world. The thing is, the virtual world is now huge, right? And it has this this exponential effect, right? And so the same way we live in a time where, you know, we have to manage our physical world in a certain way, right? We have to manage who we talk to, how much mail we open, do we take the ads in the newspaper, or, you know, clip the coupons and go buy stuff. I think in the same way we have to navigate this virtual world of information, right? It's just that it's a lot more. But we have to adapt, right? Like, one of the things I think I read about, like, with our kids, keeping them away from social media is not the solution. It's teaching them how to responsibly navigate it, right? And I think for all of us, it's the same thing. Like, I actually love my social media feed, because when I go through it, I'm like, yeah, this is all the stuff that I've been liking all this time. Right? all these trainings and these people that, you know, are doing great things, and I'm inspired by it, right? But I think there's also sort of this forethought of what am I actually interested in, right? And not necessarily, and this is something that I think we have to guard the same way now as we always had to. More now, for sure. But we have to think about, first and foremost, what is important to us, and then go sort of align that information out there with what's important to us. Because even when we see somebody else's post and we interpret it, we're interpreting with our own minds, right? Not with the person that's disseminating the information. And so it's really on us to sort of navigate and think about that. But the ship's already left the shore. This is not in any way going to ever turn back, right? So, like I said, I think we really have to maybe write a new policy and procedures manual of navigating information in the social media age. And maybe this is something that actually could become a regular topic of conversation every single day, every single week, every single year, right? Because it's a lot, right? And it's ever changing. There's seasons when we see all sorts of different things, right? We talk about politics, and we'll see it all coming out, right? And how do we sort of navigate that information as it's coming out? So that's sort of my last take on it. But we have a lot of work to do. It's much harder than it's ever been, for sure. And we're more informed, but we also have to manage that information.
All right, I'll kick it to Rhonda and Shabana to say, you know, sort of their, I mean, all these conversations are expanded. They never really close, but on this episode, sort of their last word going out, you know, on this issue.
Irrespective of all that I said, I still feel that social media is a great tool. It's quite empowering. I I particularly like that it provides an opportunity for individuals who don't have a voice to actually have a voice and to say something. That is what I absolutely love about social media. It gives voice to the voiceless. That's what I love about it. It doesn't take away from the fact that we have to be responsible, though, but at the same time, I love that it gives voice to the voiceless.
And I love social media as well. I think it's very empowering, and that's how I use social media, in an empowering way and as a medium to receive that empowerment as well as to spread it. But for me personally, social media has taught me and still is teaching me what I allow in. And it's teaching me to be more conscious and more aware of that on a daily basis, because it's so easy for my eyes to take everything in and then reprocess. So for me, it's teaching me to be more aware of what I allow in, and that's just a good life lesson. So that's what I'll leave with everyone.
Yeah, my outgoing thing would be, like so many things in life, social media is just social media. It's neither good nor evil. We make it what it's going to be. And it can be a force for evil in the world, but it could also be a force for good. The irony of it is that this video is going to be on social media. And people will listen to it. The irony of it.
But you have to go where the people are, right? You can't.
Exactly,
You can't
exactly.
a place where people aren't gathering.
Exactly.
But the point of it is, we get to decide whether this platform is going to be a force for good or a force for evil. And I think that that's a personal decision that we all have to make. I know that the others on Expanding the Conversation today want to make it a force for good. And I encourage everyone, all our friends and everyone out there, to take on what we talked about today in terms of that personal responsibility, so that we could really drive and push to make social media, I think, something that's positive, not just for us, but for the generation that's coming right behind us, our children, and to demonstrate to them that that it can be, in fact, a force for good in changing the world and making people connect and feel better about who they are and just life in general. So I think that's how we're going to go out today, expanding the conversation. Maybe we can get everybody to say it, right? We say on the count of 1, 2, 3, expand the conversation. Can we do that? 1, 2,
We
3.
can.
Expanding
the conversation.
That didn't work.
That's fine. We'll try it again. No, and I think we definitely have to continue to have these conversations.
Yes.
Right? It's ever changing. So thank you guys for joining us today. It's nice to have you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.